Right, let's continue looking at the state of readiness of the Zimbabwean general elections, which will be held next week, Monday. In studio with me, we're joined by Professor David Moore. He's a political analyst from the University of Johannesburg. And on the line from Harare, we are joined by Erasmus Makodza. He's a Zimbabwe Republic Police Senior Assistant Commander in charge of Zimbabwe's Harmonized elections. Good to have you on the line, Erasmus. Thanks very, very much for your time and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Lee.
All right, so let me begin in studio with Professor David Moore that I have with me. How significant are these elections that we are about to see taking place next week?
Well, they're extremely significant. The regime which came in with a soft coup to retire Robert Mugabe hinges its legitimacy on free and fair elections, or credible elections, or whatever the terminology is these days. The bar seems to get lowered with every election. So if these elections are perceived by the many, many observers, by the people of Zimbabwe, by the international community as lacking, and if they're very, very close, if there's a runoff, you know, the presidential election, if one candidate doesn't get 50% plus one vote, then there's a runoff. And that's a very tense situation. So, and everybody remembers 2008, when the runoff was followed by many, many killings, which, of course, the current president was involved in intimately. So, on the backdrop of many elections which have not been seen by objective observers, or many observers, as free and fair, and on the backdrop of a soft coup, and on the backdrop of new leaders, no Mugabe, no Morgan Tsvangirai, 23 presidential candidates, more public freedom than there has been before, and a tight race. I think it's very significant indeed.
Yeah, it really is. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper with you in just a second, but I want to get the opinion from Commissioner Makodza, who we've got on the line from Harare. Now, we find it very difficult to not bring up and not remember what happened last month. It was a devastating incident where we saw that explosion that killed one person. It injured 50 people. This was, of course, during in Bulawayo, during President Mnangagwa's visit to the stadium. Are there any updates on what happened, and is this putting a very big sense of nervousness ahead of the elections?
Yes, let me say this to you, Lee. We have investigations that are underway, and at the moment I would not want to comment much since the case is still being investigated. The prevailing situation in the country is that there is peace at the moment, despite that unfortunate incident. Of course, there are cases of tearing posters, defacing posters, here and there that are happening, but generally speaking, the political environment is very stable, and it appears everyone is campaigning freely, and we expect these elections to come out in an environment that is peaceful, credible, and fair.
Are the police ready for this year's elections?
Sorry?
The police, are they ready for the elections?
I can confirm that we are 100% ready to deal with anyone who is violating the laws of the country. What we have done as the Zimbabwe Republic Police is that we have come up with an election strategy, and also our provincial commanders have come up with tactical plans. We have sent our men and women who are involved in these plebiscites on a serious training program. Their training program was encompassing the Electoral Act, public order and security, also human rights. The police have been given a police guiding manual that will guide them when executing these duties.
Yeah.
We are also doing awareness campaigns for the public to shun violence. So we have our public relations officers throughout the country preaching the gospel of peace. We are also engaging stakeholders that are civic organizations, faith-based organizations, and churches to assist and preach the gospel of peace. We have also appointed special liaison officers. The Commissioner General of Police, Comrade G.T. Matanga, has appointed special liaison officers in each province. These are officers specifically responsible to deal with election issues. They work together with political parties and human rights commissions.
Yeah. I want to just bring Professor Moore into the conversation again and talk to him about SADC basically coming out with a rather scathing statement saying that the observer mission says it will not endorse a bogus election in Zimbabwe. And they're not very happy with what they saw, particularly with what happened with former President Robert Mugabe. Talk to us about what are they saying? Why? Why will they not endorse this?
Well, I don't think anybody in the international community can endorse an election which is seen to be faulty. Whether or not they endorsed or didn't the disposal of Robert Mugabe, I think is an open question. Pretty much SADC and the AU kept their hands off and said it wasn't a coup. I think it's very interesting. There was, the elders are in Zimbabwe now, Kofi Annan and Mary Robinson and so on. And Kofi Annan made some statement about how Nelson Chamisa must not raise false issues about the ballot papers and would they boycott an election and so on. And that was picked up very quickly by the state newspapers and, repeating this warning. So I think now perhaps one might see that if the MDC is gaining traction and getting more gumption and maybe, being a bit more radical, one could say that if one was SADC, well, maybe they went too far and are claiming and are making improper claims about the impartiality of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and so on. I mean, we do have these issues already, and it's too late to reprint the ballots, of 2 columns, and on the top right column, you see, guess who? Emerson Mnangagwa.
Yeah.
And that's where your eyes go first.
Automatically, that's the first
and
one.
Apparently many other in polling ballot papers just go straight down. So, I mean, these are some issues, but it's really too late.
Yeah.
The thing to do, I think, for opposition parties and the neutral NGOs and election watching monitors is to make very, very sure that at every polling station, when those results are posted out, because that's something that was very interesting in 2008. It was the first time the Mauritius-based SADC electoral rules were imposed in South Africa. Post the results at every polling station. If the monitors can get those results to a central station faster than the counting can happen by the Electoral Resources Unit, which gets the trucks, takes the ballots to a central place and counts them officially. That's often where discrepancies have happened in the past.
Yeah.
The counting goes a bit funny. And sometimes it takes 6 weeks to count, like in 2008.
Yes.
This time, I think I'm not sure what the Constitution says, but it's a few days you've got. So if you can get 11,000 election monitors out there or something, to an incredible number of polling stations, some of which have 2 registered people at a street corner somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Others of them have 70,000 because the constituencies were never changed since 2013, which was fine. The Constitution didn't say, but you've had incredible movements of people in the past 5 years. So very, very carefully, there's going to have to be a monitoring on the spot of every polling station. Get that to some central monitoring agency
and let the counting begin.
And let the counting begin.
Because that's where things go wrong.
Both sides are going to be counting.
Which will be an interesting question to Commissioner Makodza to ask him. Commissioner, what kind of security is there going to be at the polling stations? And once the votes have been cast, those vehicles that take those votes to a central counting station, again, is protection in place? Because there have been allegations in the past that there's been a lot of interference in the Zimbabwe elections, with ballots being counted and they, not being free and fair and above board at all. So talk to us about the protection of these votes inside the polling or outside the polling stations, and also the vehicles that are taking these votes to the counting stations. Commissioner, are you still with us?
There is order in these plebiscites. What I would want to let you know is that the Zimbabwe Republic Police is going to deploy 5 police officers at each polling station. 1 police officer will be inside the polling station. The other one will be by the entrance door. The other 3 officers will be patrolling on a 300-meter periphery of the polling station. The police are only going to provide security for the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission officers who will be transporting these ballot materials. The police are not involved in the transportation of ballot material. They are only there to provide security.
All right. Commissioner, good to know, because that, I think, I can see Professor Moore sort of shaking his head, nodding in agreement. That's the way it should be. Not to have involvement from the police when it comes to the ballot papers.
I would consult the constitutional expert on something like that,
Okay.
Derek Matachek or something from the ISS.
Yeah.
Last time we had lots of allegations that the police were assisting voters, maybe an illiterate person or an allegedly illiterate person. I think one would want to make sure that there are some allegations of people with an ID who are in 2 different places, that sort of thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But certainly the parties and the NGO monitors should be there as well.
Should be watching
to help the police.
I want to talk to you about these elections, because this is not clear-cut. I mean, this is going to be, and many people are saying, at a very tight race between these 2 contesting parties. I mean, the race between Nelson Chimasa's MDC Alliance and the ZANU-PF, Emerson Mnangagwa. It's difficult to call, and many people are saying that, but there's a legacy here as well for the ZANU-PF at stake. What do you think? I mean, how close is this going to be?
Well, the Afrobarometer's report last week, and that I think is the most respected poll, the Electoral Resources ERC, I forget what the C stands for, released the polls that the British and the Americans and so on were taking. These ones had about a 52, 53, sometimes even higher, 57 victory for Mnangagwa. But they didn't incorporate that 20% of undecided or won't say. Won't say doesn't necessarily mean undecided. It just means they won't say because they're afraid you're ZANU-PF if you're the pollster. So there's a 3% gap in the Afrobarometer poll, which was released Friday, but there's 20% of people who either won't or are undecided.
Yeah.
Now, and there's still a big fear factor. There's still around 40, 41, 42% of a fear factor. People are afraid that there will be violence after the election, that there will be infringements on the freedom and fairness of the elections. So you could have a lot of people who would vote ZANU-PF but don't really want to. It's not in their heart.
Yeah.
That's the presidential election. There's a different parliamentary election going on. And that's where you'll see more interesting things. So you have the former G40, the former Generation 40 faction of the ZANU-PF, which lost out in the coup, led in cyberspace by Jonathan Moyle, right? They are saying, vote for Chimisa for president, but vote for a ZANU-PF for your local candidate, right?
Ah, okay.
And that happened a bit in 2008 too, and part of the operation to take revenge was about people who didn't vote for Mugabe president but voted for the local person. So you could end up with a hung parliament, you could end up with a parliament with a less than 2/3 majority for the winning party. If you had a parliament with a more than 66.6% majority for another party, they could impeach the president. There are lots of configurations at that level. So, and you even in some ZANU-PF constituencies, you have candidates which were put in without the will of the people. They were kind of imposed on top. Or in other cases, you have candidates which are with the losing faction, with the G40 faction. So what will happen in ZANU-PF after that? Similar things have happened in the MDC. The alliance is not tight. It's 7 parties. Many of those parties were parties which split off from the old MDC under Morgan Tsvangirai. Tendai Biti split off. Welshman Nube split off ages ago. How are they going to get along with the new leader? Chamisa kind of jumped in pretty quickly after Morgan Tsvangirai's death and took over the leadership with some, perhaps, constitutional impropriety. And so can he hold that thing together? Or will the other candidates from the other parties who are now in the alliance really, really work hard to make this alliance work? Because there are some constituencies also which candidates were imposed without the will of the people.
Indeed.
Jesse Majombi, for example, in Harare East. So on both sides, no matter who wins, there's going to be tensions within those parties.
Indeed. And that's where you have to be very, very careful. I'd like to carry on, but I can't in the interest of time. But this is just the start, because SABC will be covering these elections extensively. But Professor, thank you very, very much for your opinions and your views on these upcoming elections. David Moore is a political analyst from the University of Johannesburg. And then just from Harare, Zimbabwe, also on the line was Erasmus Makodza. He's the Zimbabwe Republic Police, talking to us about the readiness of the police to handle all of this. And it's a very difficult situation. Just on a final closing note, and I literally mean in a couple of seconds, I do believe, Commissioner, that there have been about 150 assault cases that have been reported in the run-up to these elections, a lot of them inter-party conflicts as well. Is this a worry for you as well?
What I can safely tell you, Lee, is that more cases that we have received are intra-party, but not inter-party. We have had inter-party assault cases, but very few of them. Even the intra-party, they are not more than 150. I think there are 129 now, the inter-party that we have received. And there is nothing major out of those. It's just people clashing over, why are you putting on that regalia? And why are you removing my poster? Those are the type of incidents that we have.
All right.
But the situation is quite under control.
Good. All right. Commissioner, thank you very, very much for being with us here on the program. Let's take a break. We'll have our news at 8 after this. Do stay tuned.